earthquake and tsunami sparked a disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant in Japan. With cooling systems knocked out, 3 reactors melted down. In those first days, the only thing that military and civilian authorities could do was to spray water to try and prevent further damage to the reactors. Today, the immediate crisis has passed, but Fukushima is still a very dangerous place. Thousands of workers are currently on site to conduct damage assessments and cleanup operations. In some areas, radiation levels are high enough to kill within minutes. Workers must wear masks and protective suits everywhere they go. Here, they're spraying suppressant to keep down radioactive dust. Water is also a major problem. As it's pumped into reactors, it leaks out of broken pipes and cracks, creating a radioactive mess around the contamination has spread far beyond the site. Aerial surveys reveal a plume of fallout to the northwest of the plant. When the crisis began, thousands living in these areas were evacuated to temporary shelters. Now, some may not be able to return home for decades. The Tokyo Electric Power Company has apologized to the people of Japan for the accident. But these mea culpas haven't gone down well with the Japanese public. TEPCO and the government have both come under fire. The Prime Minister, Naoto Kan, resigned in large part because of the response to the crisis. But there are signs of progress. TEPCO recently installed an elaborate filtration system to remove radiation from the water. And workers are assembling a cover over the Unit 1 reactor. Similar structures will eventually be built around Units 2 and 3, and by winter, TEPCO hopes the damaged reactors will be able to stay cool on their own, without adding more water. In many ways, Fukushima is a local disaster, but the impact stretches across all of Japan. The country depends on nuclear for over a quarter of its electricity and has faced shortages since the quake. Plans to increase its nuclear supply are now in doubt. Fukushima is the worst nuclear crisis in 25 years, and that means it's also received global attention. The International Atomic Energy Agency has visited Japan to survey the damage, and other nations are reconsidering their positions on nuclear power. Germany has decided to get out of nuclear altogether, while the U.S. and are going lengthy safety reviews. Back at Fukushima, what's going to happen in somehow, the fuel from these reactors will have to be removed, and the Japanese government has around the plant. One thing is for certain. The accident is going to stay with Japan and the world for decades to come. Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant has 6 reactors that were all built in the 1970s. They're old designs, but they were considered pretty safe. On March 11th, a magnitude 9 earthquake struck off the coast of Japan, and the earthquake was obviously bad, but the tsunami it created was what really caused trouble at the plant. Right after the earthquake, the reactors went into emergency shutdown, and they needed to be cooled. That job was being done by generators, and the tsunami came in and washed around the reactor buildings and just knocked out all those emergency systems. So without the cooling systems, the 3 reactors running at the time of the quake began to heat up. Plant workers scrambled to flood them with seawater, but it took too long, and it appears that the reactors partially melted down. Now that means that some of the fuel inside got out of its normal configuration and possibly settled at the bottom of the reactor. The process generates a lot of hydrogen gas, and that sparked a series of massive explosions at the plant over the next few days. Now, after the explosions, all that mattered was keeping these reactors very cool. Japan's military and civilian authorities did really the only thing they could at the time, which was spray water. Over the last month, the water spraying has gotten a little more systematic, and damage assessments have begun. It hasn't been easy because the radiation levels are just too high for workers to go in and look at what's happened. So what they've had to resort to is unmanned helicopters that can sort of provide an aerial view of the damage to the buildings that house the reactors. Remote cranes have also given us a look at the tops of these buildings. But what reactor operators really need to do is take a look inside. And to do this, they've turned to robots used by the U.S. military. The robots first entered Units 1 and 3 in early April. What they found wasn't particularly encouraging. As we suspected, the radiation levels are still very high. So basically, these reactors are going to have to be cooled remotely, at least for the next 6 months or so. The cooling creates another problem because water that goes into the core comes out contaminated with radioactive material. It flows out through broken pipes and cracks, and it can eventually reach the ocean. The Tokyo Electric Power Company has spent a lot of time trying to seal the leaks one way or another. Some of their techniques have been pretty crude. I mean, they've just filled this pit with concrete. TEPCO is also planning on pumping the contaminated water into temporary storage tanks, and at least trying to process some of it to clean it up. Over the next few months, the damaged reactors will also have to be covered to prevent radiation from spreading. TEPCO says it wants to build a temporary cover over the site. It could look like this one that's currently being built for Chernobyl in the Ukraine, although there it's taking well over a decade to install. Up until now, people on the site have just been focused on keeping these reactors under control. It's been a 24-hour job, and they haven't had much of an opportunity to get beyond that. But ultimately, they're going to have to figure out a way to get the fuel out and take the reactors apart. At the moment, nobody seems to have an answer for how to do this, but we're likely to see more ideas in the weeks and months ahead. For Nature Video, I'm Jeff Brumfield.